it's Lisa. How are you today? I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you for joining me for lesson 32 of my intermediate course, which is B1 or IELTS 4 to 4.5. Okay, today's lesson, what's happening? Let's have a look. It's quite a big lesson because it's on functional language, okay? And it's about asking for and stating preferences, what we prefer, and our opinions, what we think, okay? We're going to review ways of talking about what we prefer by focusing on the word prefer and others. We'll be looking at asking for people's opinions through question tags. You know what they are, don't you? And then we'll be looking at ways of showing you agree with someone, that you have something in common, something the same, by common phrases like me too, so do I, me neither, neither do I. Neither and neither, you choose how to pronounce them. As you can see, I swap between them. Okay, so it's a big lesson today. It's very meaty, full of meat, full of information, and you might need to read it a couple of times, okay, just to make sure you understand the content. Please don't forget to do the quiz at the end. Okay, let's have a look at the first task together. Read the sentences below about my entertainment preferences. So lesson 31 was about books, films and TV programs. Okay, so you might want to go back to that to refresh your memory about some vocabulary. Okay, so choose the correct form in green to complete my preferences. So let's just do number one together. Okay, I prefer reading than to or from watching TV. What do you think? The correct answer is I prefer reading to watching TV. Okay, I prefer reading to watching TV, slow speech. I prefer reading to watching TV. Number two, I'm not a great fan of the theatre. I'd rather go, or going to the cinema. Number three, although I love going to the cinema, I think I prefer watching films from the comfort of my own home. Number four, I'm not really into watching horror movies. I'd rather read a scary story to, from, than see it on the big screen. Stop the slide there if you want more time to think about which answer to choose. Okay, let's continue the task. Number five, I prefer sitcoms from than to soaps. Number six, I'd rather stay in with a good book on a Friday night to go than go to my local pub. Number seven, if I had the talent, natural ability, if I had the talent, I think I'd prefer to be or being a writer rather than a teacher. And number eight, on a Saturday night, my husband would prefer to watch or watching a gangster film, whereas I'd prefer a rom-com. Just let me do that one again. On a Saturday night, my husband would prefer to watch or watching a gangster film, whereas I'd prefer a rom-com. Okay, have you chosen your answers? That's good, let's have a look. Number one we did together. I prefer reading to watching TV. Number 2, I'm not a great fan of the theatre. I'd rather go to the cinema. So I'd rather plus the base verb, go. Although I love going to the cinema, I think I prefer watching films from the comfort of my own home. Here we go. So I prefer watching films. We need the verb ing. Yeah, like I like watching films. I prefer watching films from the comfort of my own home. Okay. Number 4, I'm not really into watching horror movies. I'd rather read a scary story than see it on the big screen. Okay, so not to or from, but than here. I prefer books to TV, but I'd rather read than watch. Okay? So they're just different, aren't they? They have the same meaning, but the verbs require different grammatical forms. If you're doing an IELTS exam or a Cambridge exam, like the PET, the KET, no, not the KET so much, but the PET or the FIRST, certainly you need to know these. Here we go. I prefer sitcoms to soaps. I'd rather stay in with a good book than go to my local pub. Okay, if I had the talent, I think I'd prefer to be a writer. Okay, I'd prefer to be. I prefer watching, present simple, general. I'd prefer to be, conditional, specific. I'd prefer to be a writer than a teacher. And here it's a conditional tense. If I had the talent, it's a second conditional. Number 8, on a Saturday night, my husband would prefer to watch a gangster film, whereas I'd prefer to watch a rom-com. How did you do with those? So I think it's very important for you to record them with your own preferences. So use my ideas here, but record them for yourself. Okay, I've done a little focus on form here. So I prefer books to TV programs. Here we are. When we're talking about what we prefer in general, we can just use I prefer in the simple tense with nouns. Books, I prefer books to TV programs. Straightforward. When we use a verb, we need the ing form for general preferences. Yeah, I prefer reading books to watching TV. Okay, when we're talking about a specific preference on a specific day or after a specific condition, that's when we use would prefer. And it has the same meaning as the simple tense, but it's much more specific. Yeah. Here we go. On a Saturday night, my husband would prefer a gangster movie, whereas I'd prefer a rom-com. If I had the talent, I would, contraction, I'd prefer to be a writer. Yeah, so here we have a specific preference, I'd prefer to be, to plus verb. Yeah, to plus the base verb. So people often confuse those. Yeah, I prefer reading books, and if I had the opportunity, I'd prefer to be a writer. Okay? What about rather than? So it means the same as prefer. I'd rather go to the cinema. Yeah, I'd prefer to go to the cinema in this sense. I'm not a theatre fan. I prefer the cinema. So listen, I'm not a theatre fan. I'd rather go to the cinema. I'd rather plus base verb. I'm not a theatre fan. I prefer the cinema. Or I'd prefer to go to the cinema. I'd rather read a book than watch TV. Yeah, and if I had the talent, I'd rather be a writer than a teacher. Oh, you need to write those down and highlight them. Use colours like I have to show you the differences in form there. Okay? Task 2. Do you agree or disagree with me? How many phrases do you know which mean I agree or I disagree? Complete the table below. Yeah, so I've already done one for you. You've got the titles I agree, I disagree at the top. And then I've written in, I totally agree with you. Or, I'm sorry, but I disagree. And that's very British, isn't it? When we always want to be polite. So we don't say, I disagree. We say, I'm sorry, I disagree, or I'm sorry, but I disagree. And that's very, very, very British. Can you fill in any more? There's space for 4 of each. Don't worry if you can't, I've done it for you with my ideas, but just take a moment to try and think of how many phrases you know for agreeing and disagreeing. Stop the slide here. Okay, here come the answers. These are my answers, okay? So different ways of agreeing. Do you have these? I totally agree with you. That's true. Exactly. So you've got to give it real emphatic stress. Exactly. To show that you agree. You're right. You're right. I couldn't agree more. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's a negative. So you think, oh, maybe that means disagree. It's very strong agreement. I couldn't agree more. It means the same as I totally agree with you. What about in disagree? I'm sorry, but I disagree. That's not true. Nonsense. That's quite strong nonsense. I would only use that really with my family. I would only use this with people that I knew really well because it's very direct. Nonsense. But we do use it. Okay, I'm afraid that isn't right. Again, I'm sorry, I'm afraid, just to make it more polite. And I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. There we go. Please make a note of those because they are extremely useful, especially for those of you taking the first certificate or when it comes to when you work with your partner and the pet, where you work in a pair and you have to agree or disagree and say why. Okay, so back to my sentences. I'll just come back into the picture a minute. These are back to my original sentences about my preferences about films and books, entertainment. Okay, what's your view? Use one of the agree, disagree phrases from the table in task 2, and then say what your preferences are and why. Just read that instruction for me again, please. What's your view on this? Do you disagree or agree with me? What your preference is or why. So let's do the first one together. I say, I prefer reading to watching TV. Imagine you agree with me. What do you say? That's true, for example. Okay, and then tell me why. What about if you disagree? I prefer reading to watching TV. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. I'm sorry, I disagree. Tell me, maybe, I prefer watching TV to reading books, and then tell me why. Okay, so I think it would be a really good idea if you have a notebook here, and the first thing you do is you think about if you agree or disagree with me and find a phrase, write it down. Yeah? Tell me why. Make sure you tell me your preference using I prefer ing to ing. Okay? Number 2, I'm not a great fan of the theatre. I'd rather go to the cinema. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your preferences and why? Number 3, although I love going to the cinema, I think I prefer watching films from the comfort of my own home. What about you? Number 4, I'm not really into watching horror movies, it's too much, but I'd rather read a scary story than see it on the big screen. What's your opinion? Number 5, I prefer sitcoms to soap operas, soaps. How about you? And number 6, I'd rather stay in with a good book on a Friday night than go to my local pub. Do you agree? Do you have the same opinion or a different one, and why? So it's very important to take some time to do the agree or disagree task, because obviously those are your ideas. Yes, and it's a chance for you to personalise the language to make it your own. And I'd really like you to experiment with all the different forms of prefer and I'd rather, as well as choosing 2 of your favourite ways of agreeing and disagreeing and saying why. Now, obviously, because this is a recording, I don't get to hear you, but please take time to think about your answers, record them if you can do that on your phone, or write them down in a notebook if you are a visual learner, and make sure you try and use the new language. Okay? Let's have a look at the next task. Oh, yes. The next task is on question tags, which are very, very common in spoken English. Aren't they? Okay, so I've got 3 questions for you first, before there is a brief practice task. Okay, you know why we use question tags, don't you? And here I've written, to check that what you think is true is actually true. We use them a lot in speech. It keeps the conversation going. When I listen to lower level speakers of English, they use a lot of questions. Okay, but the question stops there and it encourages the speaker, the person answering, to just give a one-word answer. Okay, whereas question tags can keep the conversation going, and we like to find out that we're right, yeah, that what we think is correct is correct. So that's why we use them, or to check something when we're not sure. You've already studied how to use them, haven't you? I'm sure by the stage you get to B1 that you have already seen question tags before. Now then, if you look at these that I've done before you, when the main part of the sentence is positive, you know why we use question tags. The verb know is positive. Then we need an auxiliary which is negative, don't you? Yeah, you've already studied how to use them. There, the auxiliary is have, haven't you? Okay, so when the main part of the sentence is positive, the question tag is negative. When the main part of the sentence is negative, you don't know how to use question tags. The tag is positive, do you? You haven't studied how to use question tags, have you? Okay. How does that sound? Okay, you're sure about intonation, aren't you? So what happens with our voices? Okay, and our intonation can go up at the end of the question tag, or it can come down. Okay, and it goes up if our question is real, if we really don't know the answer. So, for example, you know why we use question tags, don't you? I'm not sure that you do. You know how to use question tags, don't you? I want to check. If I'm more sure, listen, you know how to use question tags, don't you? You know how to use question tags, don't you? And it means I'm 99% sure that you know how to use them. Okay, so when I'm not sure, you know how to use question tags, don't you? And when I'm sure, you know how to use question tags, don't you? Now, that's a very brief introduction to question tags. The main thing to do first is to have some practice using the correct form of the question tag. So let's do number one together. Number one, you prefer reading to watching TV? Okay, so the verb you prefer, is that positive or negative? That's right, it's positive. So the question tag has to be positive or negative? Yep, we need a negative question tag. Okay, let's look at the verb prefer. If you want to make a question with prefer, what auxiliary do you need? That's right, we need the auxiliary do. Do you prefer? Okay, but we know we need a negative tag here because we've got prefer as positive. So we need don't you. Yeah, you prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? If I don't know. Or you prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? If I know. Okay. What about number two? You're not a great fan of the theatre. You're not. Main part of the sentence is negative or positive? It's negative. So the tag needs to be negative or positive? Positive. And the auxiliary verb here is the verb do or be. And it's be. Okay? Your turn. You'd rather read a horror story than watch a horror film. Okay. Positive or negative in the main part? Positive. Good. So question tag is negative. And what's the auxiliary? in number 3, you'd rather. Is it would or had? It's would. Okay, remember that. Number 4, if you had the talent, you'd prefer to be a writer rather than a teacher. You'd prefer. Positive or negative? Positive. So the question tag is positive or negative? Negative. And the auxiliary that you need is would or had? Would. Number 5, your husband can't stand rom-coms. Okay, can't stand, it means the same as like or hate. Yeah, it means hate. Your husband can't stand rom-coms. Okay, so can't, is that negative or positive? It's negative, so the question tag needs to be positive, and the auxiliary is can. Okay, you used to love going to the pub on a Friday night. Used to, positive or negative? Positive. So the question tag will be negative. And what auxiliary do we use? Is this talking about the present or the past? Okay, it's the past, isn't it? So we need do or did? That's right, we need did. I have said enough. I'm going to stop talking now. Please take time to do the question tags now. Okay, I'm going to give you the answers in a moment, so please stop now. Otherwise, here come the answers. Number 1, you prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? You're not a great fan of the theatre, are you? Number 3, you'd rather read a horror story than watch a horror film, wouldn't you? Number 4, if you had the talent, you'd prefer to be a writer rather than a teacher, wouldn't you? Your husband can't stand rom-coms, can he? And finally, you used to love going to the pub on a Friday night, didn't you? Note bene, NB, we've got one irregular form in question tags, and it's with the verb to be, of course, in this I form, when I is the subject. I'm very middle-aged. Not am not I, but aren't I. I'm very middle-aged, aren't I? Yeah, it's very middle-aged to stay in and read a book rather than go to the pub, isn't it? I'm very middle-aged, aren't I? Yeah, that's an irregular form. Now, I would highly recommend that you go back to the question tags and try to think again about all of that information, because there was a lot in there. Okay, it's almost like a code, isn't it? Because you have to think, if the main part is positive, you need a negative tag. Okay, if the main part is negative, you need a positive tag. Then you need to think about the auxiliary, and then you need to think about your view. If it's a real question, your voice goes up. Yeah, you prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? Or down if you think you know you're right. You prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? So there's a lot for you to practice there, and it's really, really important that you write these down first. So you write down the correct main part of the sentence with the correct tag using the things that I've given you. And then I think it's really important for you to practice speaking, practice your pronunciation with these, and remember, if you don't know the answer, if you're not sure about the answer, your voice needs to go up in the tag and down. Yeah, so don't you, depending on how sure you are about the answer. There's a lot there, isn't there? And I'm not there to help you, so you need to be really independent here and quite disciplined if you want to get these right. If you spend a lot of time talking to people in English, it would be really good for you to practice some tags. Perhaps practice using the present simple, yes, with do you, don't you, aren't you, okay, just to get used to it. That's my top tip. Okay, final task. Even I'm tired and I'm not doing all of the work, you are. Here we go. Shall I show you what I'm talking about? Complete the sentence below with the missing word to show that you have something in common with the speaker. Okay, so look at the first sentence. You prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? The person says, yes, I do. Short answer. If you have something in common with them, you say, me too. Or, so I. Any idea what we can put in that gap? Can't hear you. So do I. I prefer reading. So do I. Yeah, we don't repeat the verb prefer. We repeat the auxiliary. Yeah. And finally, I too. I do too. So they all mean the same. Me too, so do I do too. And they're all ways of showing that you have something in common with the person you are speaking to. And we use them a lot in spoken English. We use them every single day. Yeah, we like to find things in common with other people, don't we? It's natural. Okay, so you prefer reading to watching TV, don't you? Yes, I do. Me too. So do I. I do too. What happens in number 2 when it's negative? You're not a great fan of the theatre, are you? Not really, no, says your partner. Me, neither I or I'm not. Take a minute, stop the slide, complete the gaps. Okay, you're not a great fan of the theatre, are you? Not really, no. Me, neither. Neither am I. I'm not either. Aha. I'm not either. So, me, neither. Neither am I. I'm not either. The N is in the not, so we drop it and we use either. Don't worry, I've written them down for you here. I've written the answers down for you here, look. Number 1 and number 2. Me neither, neither am I, I'm not either. And you can also say me neither, neither am I'm not either. And both pronunciations are correct. It's not a case of one being British and one being American, because even I notice I change between them all the time. It's just what comes out, comes out. You choose which you prefer, neither, neither, and you can mix them. It doesn't matter. Okay? Right, great. Let's look at some more. Okay. Your turn. You can watch British and American films where you live, can't you? Yes, I can. I too, so I too. Fill in the gaps, please, in number 3. Ready? Number 4. You haven't met any British or American film stars, have you? No, of course not. I either. Neither. I. Neither. Fill in the gaps. And last one. You didn't enjoy English You didn't enjoy English literature at school, did you? No, I absolutely hated it. Me, did I? Did too. Fill in the gaps. Okay, shall we have a look at the answers here? Here we go. You can watch British and American films where you live, can't you? Yes, I can. I can too. So can I. Me too. You haven't met any British or American film stars, have you? No, of course not. I haven't either. Neither have I. Me neither. And finally, you didn't enjoy English literature at school, did you? No, I absolutely hated it. Me too. So did I. I did too. Okay? So stop the screen here if you want to freeze that page. Okay? So you can see what I mean. Lesson 32 it's got a lot of information, and it's functional language, so it's all about spoken English, particularly the question tags and the me toos and the me neithers. They're all really common in spoken language, and if you want to make your English sound as natural as possible, these are the things that really, really are very good to work on. Yeah. Why don't you go onto YouTube and find a clip on question tags and listen to people using them? Why don't you go onto YouTube and find a clip of people finding things in common, okay, and listen for them? Yeah. Don't forget to also go to my quiz, lesson 32 quiz after this for more practice. And I promise that later on in the course, I'll come back to this and give you some more practice. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a big one. Okay, thank you for following me today, and I hope to see you again very soon. Whatever you're doing, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.